This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Gitu-Yuwat. It's Monday, February 1st. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees, so our broadcast will look different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. We begin our broadcast in East Africa, where a 7-hour siege in Mogadishu Sunday night ended with 9 people dead, according to the Somali government. Mohamed Nur Galal, a well-known retired general and former defense minister, was among those confirmed killed in the attack on the popular Hotel Afrique. The hotel, located along a strategic road linking downtown Mogadishu with International Airport, is frequented by politicians, lawmakers, and senior civil servants. Security forces were able to rescue dozens of people from the hotel during the siege. The Al-Shabaab terrorist group is claiming responsibility for the attack. Somali President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo and the country's Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble sent condolences following Galal's death. Police say all 4 Al-Shabaab militants who stormed Hotel Afrique were killed. A car bomb exploded near the hotel early Sunday, beginning a shootout between militants and security forces. Police say Al-Shabaab members stormed the hotel and many of the people inside were rescued. VOA reporter Abdikafi Yusuf Aden was inside the hotel at the time and survived. Aden says there was confusion and thick smoke rose up after the blast occurred. Aden says that he saw at least 3 people injured where he was hiding, but was unable to confirm what happened outside or on the other side of the hotel. A Somali security expert says Al-Shabaab militants are capitalizing on governance and security vacuums in Somalia as a backdrop for their latest attacks. Abdirazak Omar Mohammed, a Somali member of parliament and former security minister, told VOA's James Bati that Al-Shabaab always launches attacks when there is political instability, particularly with the current uncertainty surrounding this year's presidential election. The mandates of President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed and members of parliament are expected to end February 8th, but 2 regional states are refusing to participate in the election. Abdirazak Omar Mohammed also says the departure of U.S. troops from Somalia has also emboldened Al-Shabaab. COVID-19 is giving Zimbabwe's elite a wake-up call. Unable to travel overseas for healthcare due to the coronavirus pandemic, the rich and powerful are discovering that the country's health system has been crumbling for years and is now in danger of being overwhelmed. David Doyle has the details.
When Zimbabwe's rich and powerful get sick, they often go abroad for the best healthcare that money can buy. But with travel curtailed by the global health crisis, the elite are being exposed to a truth that has long been known by the masses. Zimbabwe's health system has been crumbling for years, and now it's struggling to cope. Among those from the upper echelons to die in recent days were 2 cabinet ministers and a retired general. At their funeral on Wednesday, Vice President Constantino Chiwenga, who has himself made several trips to China over the past 18 months for an unspecified illness, said COVID-19 had taught that we are all mortals.
It does not discriminate between the powerful and the weak, the privileged and the deprived.
A government spokesman sparked uproar this week after suggesting the deaths of ruling party officials may have been the work of, quote, medical assassins. He's since apologized and deleted his tweets after health workers pointed out that they've been risking their lives for months to treat patients without adequate protective equipment, ventilators and other vital supplies. Norman Matara, Secretary General of the Zimbabwe Association of Doctors for Human Rights, says they've been telling the government that the health system is not working.
These people, at every opportunity they get, they would go to South Africa, Indonesia, Singapore to get treatment. Now that they are facing the same system that we're talking about, they think that it's a result of medical practitioners, but it's actually a result of a broken system.
Anger among overwhelmed medics is also adding to broader dissatisfaction amidst a prolonged economic crisis, just as infections are surging. More than half of Zimbabwe's over 32,000 confirmed cases were recorded in January alone, according to a Reuters tally. The government says it's doing its best with limited resources, and the country's COVID-19 task force coordinator says Zimbabwe is equipped to handle the second wave, and that the government was emphasizing prevention after tightening lockdown rules earlier this month.
David Doyle of Reuters filed that report. American Muslims are welcoming President Joe Biden's executive order lifting travel restrictions on several Muslim-majority countries, restrictions often referred to as the travel ban or Muslim ban. VOA's Yunus Salim spoke to American Muslims in this report, narrated by Nova Pawadi.
Muslim Americans applauded President Joe Biden's executive order reversing the travel restrictions imposed by the previous Trump administration. Usama Jamal is with the Muslim advocacy group, the U.S. Council of Muslim Organizations.
We were very delighted with the executive order that President Joe Biden promised to execute the first day of his presidency, and that is to repeal the Muslim ban that President Trump did in his 4 years of administration.
Muslims impacted by the restrictions also welcomed the move, including Abrar Omeish, a Libyan American in Northern Virginia.
I definitely was skeptical when I heard about it being on his agenda as he was running in the beginning, but I'm really pleased to see that he followed up on that.
Abrar Omeish was born and raised in the U.S. and in 2019 was elected to Fairfax County's school board. She says the so-called travel ban during the Trump administration made her question her place in America.
And that honestly even made me feel kind of like a second-class citizen, where all of my friends, my peers had the opportunity to enjoy their family and their extended family, and in the holidays they go visit special occasions, whether that be a graduation or an engagement or a new baby, but that wasn't even something I could consider or think about or imagine. And it was
Libya was one of the countries that President Trump put on a travel restriction list in an executive order he signed in January 2017. Other countries on the list included Iran, Iraq, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. The Trump administration said the order helped protect America by keeping out potentially dangerous people from countries with major security problems. On President Biden's first day in office, he revoked the measure, saying it was a, quote, stain on our national conscience and inconsistent with America's long tradition of welcoming immigrants. Muslim advocacy groups say they support Biden's plan to reform immigration.
I understand that we need to have immigration reform, and American Muslims will support immigration reform that will improve the way that we welcome, the way that we bring and allow immigrants to come to this country.
President Biden campaigned on promises to lift the travel ban and pass comprehensive immigration reform. For producer Yuni Salim in Washington, Nova Pawadi, VOA News.
Michael Agwanda, a Nairobi-based political analyst, says that President Joe Biden's reversal of former President Donald Trump's policies, particularly related to immigration, is being seen by some Africans as a sign of positive change.
And with the new regime of President Joe Biden, I think there's a bit of renewed hope. Remember that one of the things that Africa is so keen about is the immigration issues, because there are many immigrants from Africa to United States of America who are doing a lot of work in America. Some professionals, some unprofessionals, but are doing all manner of work. And when you have a situation where their life is uncertain and their stay in the United States of America is having a glimmer of uncertainty, then there is great fear. And for that reason, we know that during President Trump time, a lot of immigrants from Africa were repatriated back home. Unfortunately, for one reason or the other. But this might not be necessarily a wrong thing. However, anybody who is repatriated is not repatriated with joy on his face, because they've left friends, they've left their job, they have an uncertainty of life in Africa, and for that reason, they come, with great uncertainty. And I think when I saw President Joe Biden sign an executive order on immigration issues, on DACA cases, and also lifting ban on some Muslim African countries, I think there was a glimmer of hope.
Agwanda also says that the United States needs to rethink its strategy to administering healthcare-related aid and should help the continent address the brain drain of its best and brightest.
The Democrats have had a great relationship with the Africans. Not to say that the Republicans haven't had a good relationship. We know that President Bush brought PEPFAR fund and help with HIV/AIDS in a big way, and so give it to them. However, in this case, we are having a Democratic administration, and the Democrats could have a huge impact in Africa if they devise a different strategy in approaching the pandemic, and that is, HIV/AIDS pandemic, in approaching COVID-19 pandemic, in approaching health matters in Africa. I think the tendency that has been there in the past in terms of a relationship between the United States of America and the African nation has been specifically to work with the government, and they've been throwing a lot of health of finances and resources through the government system. I think it will be important that Joe Biden and Harris administration will diversify on how they want to fund organizations in Africa. And I think through community-based organization, that will benefit people one-on-one on the grassroots level. And I think it is also important that we also think of a way on how we can stop the immigrants from Africa to United States of America. And the only way to do that is to create democratic society in Africa and still pushing the agenda of democracy. Not to say that Africa does not have democracy. Yes, they do have democracy, but it's a conditional democracy. It's a limited democracy. I think a further democracy agenda needs to be addressed.
That was Michael Agwanda, a Nairobi-based political analyst. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, the Confederation of African Football president is back on the job Monday after having a 5-year FIFA ban temporarily frozen by sport's highest court. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Africa 54. The year 2020 saw a wave of protests in the United States denouncing police brutality and demanding social justice during the final year of the Trump administration. Isha Sarai spoke with activists, protesters, and organizers across the country about the future of the movement with a Democrat in the White House.
After months of protests in defense of Black lives, President Joe Biden signed several executive orders reiterating his support for racial justice in his first week in office.
In my campaign for president, I made it very clear that the moment had arrived as a nation where we face deep racial inequities in America and systemic racism that has plagued our nation for far, far too long.
But some activists are unconvinced the president will fulfill demands of the movement. such as redirecting some police funding and abolishing private federal prisons, even though Biden signed an executive order phasing out private prison contracts.
We're not too thrilled about him, but we're hoping that he's going to make a lot of changes and do something right for our people. But he wasn't our first choice, but because he was the only choice, we'd rather have him than Donald Trump.
Just because Biden was elected does not mean that he's going to do the right things for BLM. We voted out Trump. So now it's time to make sure that Biden is going to follow everything the black community needs.
Some activists say the key will be holding Biden accountable by reinforcing the grassroots organizing in communities of color that helped propel him to office.
Immediately before he became president, we saw an enormous amount of unprecedented pressure from grassroots organizations, grassroots people all across the country, mostly affiliated with Black Lives Matter, but certainly in other groups, really pushing for racial equity, really pushing for justice.
While some protests against racial injustice have been marred by violence, which both Biden and Trump condemned, the movement has largely advocated for peaceful protests and underscored the importance of work on local levels.
My opinion as somebody who does grassroots organizing is that a lot of that is going to come from like the cities we live in, the organizing we do, keeping the narrative conversations going.
Organizers who work for racial justice even when protests aren't making national headlines encourage fellow Americans to continue having conversations about correcting injustices.
People don't always know that they can contribute in different ways other than maybe being seen as somebody who's speaking and who's like shouting or who's like maybe like somebody saying their story. There's so many like really tangible ways that a movement can be supported.
You can keep the conversation relevant with the people in your household. You can keep the conversation relevant with people in your churches or in your communities, wherever you socially gather, virtually, of course.
Activists are optimistic the conversation will remain relevant in Washington as well. Isha Sarai, VOA News, Washington.
U.S. President Joe Biden has reversed several Trump administration health care policies, including one that restricted access to abortion both inside and outside the United States. VOA White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara has this story on what Biden's actions may mean for women's reproductive rights around the world.
Clinics offering women's reproductive health services around the world can now provide information about abortion without fear of losing American funding. On Thursday, President Joe Biden signed an executive order to expand access to reproductive health care domestically and abroad, including rescinding the Mexico City policy, also known as the Global Gag Rule. The 1984 measure, supported by Republican presidents since Ronald Reagan, blocks U.S. federal funding for non-governmental organizations that provide abortion counseling or referrals, advocate to decriminalize abortion, or expand abortion services abroad.
The second order I'm signing relates to protecting women's health at home and abroad, and it reinstates the changes that were made in Title X and other things, making it harder for women to have access to affordable health care as it relates to reproductive rights.
Previous Democratic presidents, including Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, have rescinded the rule, arguing that it deprives women and girls around the world of access to critical health care.
Every time funding for reproductive health care services, including for abortion care, is cut or undermined, whether globally or domestically, people's health is at risk, people's economic security is at risk, and quite frankly, people's lives are at risk.
Biden also reversed the Trump administration's domestic abortion restrictions. Abortion is legal in the U.S., but has been more difficult to access under Trump.
It would be a wonderful step if we could actually limit that more, but unfortunately, under the Biden administration, I only see him pushing for more pro-choice legislation.
In another move to roll back Trump policies, Biden signed orders expanding access to the federal health insurance program Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, the health insurance legislation also known as Obamacare.
Basically, the best way to describe them, to undo the damage Trump has done.
According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, roughly 15 million uninsured Americans could benefit from the expansion of these programs. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
U.S. congressional leaders are set to open debate this week on a COVID-19 economic relief measure as vaccinations continue nationwide. Michelle Quinn reports.
In the United States, coronavirus cases have been dropping, along with hospitalizations. Still, January was a deadly month, with more than 90,000 lives lost to the COVID-19 disease caused by the virus. The vaccine rollout has been chaotic and raised questions about who is receiving the vaccine.
Can we get vaccines to those people who are at the greatest risk of being infected, being hospitalized, and dying?
Pressure is on Congress to get more money to states to help with the vaccination effort and to help people who are suffering economically. Congress this week is expected to take up President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief bill, a broad package that includes money for a national vaccination program and expansion of unemployment payments. The question is whether Republicans will support the package.
I support passing COVID relief with support from Republicans if we can get it, but the COVID relief has to pass. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
Many Republican lawmakers have balked at the legislation's price tag and question whether all the spending is necessary. 10 Republican senators wrote a letter to Biden Sunday asking for a compromise and offering a counterproposal of about 1/3 of what Democratic leaders are seeking. One of them, Senator Bill Cassidy, a Republican from Louisiana, said on Fox News Sunday that Biden was pursuing not real unity, but the patina of bipartisanship. Democrats say they will seek a process that will allow them to pass the bill with a slim majority. Senator Bernie Sanders is an independent from Vermont and the incoming Senate Budget Committee chair.
If Republicans want to work with us, they have better ideas on how to address those crises, that's great. But to be honest with you, I have not yet heard that.
The window for moving fast on the legislation may be temporarily closing. The February 9 Senate impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump could slow lawmakers' work. Michelle Quinn, VOA News.
U.S. authorities are highlighting the issue of human trafficking, the exploitation of others for labor or sex work, which often targets children. VOA's Elizabeth Lee shows how law enforcement and social agencies are working together to rescue victims and help them recover.
In foster care and group homes since an early age, a young woman who calls herself Egypt entered the sex trade at 16 at the suggestion of a friend.
She was like, you have a vagina, make some money and live your life. So I was like, okay, I guess.
What followed was a cycle of abuse. A recent law enforcement operation in Los Angeles rescued 33 missing children, 8 of them trafficking victims who, like Egypt, had been sexually exploited. The joint effort, called Operation Lost Angels, involved multiple branches of law enforcement and social service agencies.
Traffickers are very good at figuring out particularly what that vulnerability is, fulfilling that for the child, and then eventually forcing them or coercing them, or even if they're children, it doesn't have to be force, fraud, and coercion, right? They're kids, they're vulnerable.
There are organizations that offer assistance, including Children of the Night. Lois Lee founded the organization.
These children, many were brought up in crack houses. Their parents sold them for drugs. They were molested or raped before they could walk.
Often removed from abusive families, many, like Egypt, were placed in foster homes, temporary settings that sometimes weren't much better. Traffickers and pimps promise a better life. Egypt didn't like the life, but liked the money.
Well, I just made 1,000 within a day, so why not keep doing this? A job doesn't give me 1,000 hand up, so why not keep doing this? Walk around with a new iPhone, hair done, nails done, clothes, and stuff like that.
Hopes were quickly shattered. A friend was murdered. An attack on Egypt could have killed her.
Luckily, I was like 2 minutes a walk from the police station, ran to the police station, and they were like, what happened? I was like, I really don't remember. All I remember is a crowbar, 4 people, and then just went out.
Gay teens who are rejected by their families also struggle on the streets. A charity worker recalls a young man in the sex trade.
He was prostituting, like I said, for food to eat and a place to sleep.
Intervention programs help, but those who work with youngsters on the street say only a comprehensive approach can break the cycle.
We have to resolve a lot of those problems that are in the home. We have to get a handle on drugs. There's just no question about it.
A survivor, Egypt wants to go to college and is hopeful about her future.
Sometimes you're in the darkness, but there's always some type of light at the end of the tunnel.
Lee says her organization helped 500 children last year. Many more are still on the streets, exploited and desperate. Elizabeth Lee, VOA News, Los Angeles.
In sports news, Confederation of African Football President Ahmad resumed his duties Sunday after having a 5-year FIFA ban temporarily frozen by sport's highest court while he appeals, according to the continental governing body. The former Madagascar Minister of Fisheries, voted as African football's top official in 2017, was suspended for 5 years by FIFA in November after being accused of abuse of office, mishandling funds and trading gifts. But the ban was frozen Friday by the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which says it will hear Ahmad's appeal on March 2nd and deliver a verdict before March 12th so as not to prejudice his chances of running for re-election should his suspension be overturned. Ahmad wants to run for re-election on March 12th at the CAF Congress in Morocco, but was ruled ineligible by a FIFA review committee because of the ban. Ahmad says the FIFA suspension is incomprehensible and shocking and says it was implemented to prevent him from being re-elected to the presidency of CAF. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, we thank you for watching.
Ili kuwa mwanafamilia bora wa Global TV, usisahau kusubscribe, like, kushare na kucomment. Baada ya kusubscribe, bonyeza alama ya kengele ili kupata taarifa kwa kila video inayopanda Global TV Online.